Three. Hello, everybody. So here we are in another episode of this small firm exchange presentation, introduction, interviews, where we talk about the topic of the year, which is practice. And we have somebody that really knows about practice. Joshua Zinder is joining us. He's a board member of the Small Firm Exchange representing New Jersey. And I'm going to read a little bit about his bio and what he does so that you guys get to know him. But welcome, Joshua, and thank you for being a part of this. So Joshua has built a distinguished career over more than 30 years, grounded in service to the profession, community, and his faith heritage. He holds a Bachelor of Architecture from Syracuse University and a Master's of Science in Advanced Architectural Design from Columbia University. As the founder and managing partner of Joshua Zinder Architecture Plus Design and Landau Zinder Architecture in Princeton, he emphasizes engagement and communication to foster consensus, cultural acceptance, and alliances. His firm blends traditional materials with thoughtful design, ensuring each project reflects purpose, place, and people. Wow, the 3P. His diverse portfolio spans hospitality venues, cultural and educational institutions, private homes, retail locations, mixed-use developments, multifamily residences, and government facilities. Joshua is a community advocate, often placing his project at the heart of communities. In 2021, he led the Sukkah Village in Princeton, a project that united designers, students, community, and nonprofits, and the Jewish community, raising over $40,000 and distributing over $20,000 to participating nonprofits. Nationally, Joshua serves on the executive board for the AIA National Small Firm Exchange and has presented at the AIA National Conference from 2021 to 2023. He was the AIA New Jersey president in 2021 and has co-chaired the Design Awards and Design Night Committee for a decade. He's active in various AIA New Jersey committees and serves on the AIA New Jersey Foundation board. Additionally, Joshua is involved with several community organizations, including Jewish Family and Children's Services, Gotham Princeton, the Experience Princeton Economic Development Committee, and the Princeton Jewish Centers Committee. Oh my goodness, that's a long list, Joshua. Did I miss anything? Did I say it all right?
You got it just fine. It's sometimes I wonder where I get the time to do all that when somebody reads it. So
yeah, no, I was wondering the same thing, and I made it shorter. I took some design liberty, making it shorter. So, bringing everybody into the core of the conversation. This year we're talking about practice and what it is like to open a practice, run a practice, or chair. Dana Ellis has selected that topic, which is a very good topic, and I want you to go back in time and tell me how did it all get started? How do you even find architecture as a career?
how did I find architecture as a career? There were a number of things, but probably the most significant thing was that I failed 7th grade Spanish, and I was put into a mechanical drawing class, and for the first time ever, I discovered something that was easy. I finished the curriculum for the class, that was a semester long and a quarter. And over the next couple of years, the teacher I had, who was really a fabulous teacher, I would burn through his curriculum, and then he would give me objects to draw. I asked me to draw spaces, places, and really sort of did a deep dive into architecture. My parents thought that I was going to be a builder from a very young age. They bought me a box of wood, hammer, nail, and saw when I was 4. I would never have given any of my 4-year-olds real tools like that.
No.
But they saw something, and I think that combined with some visual experiences. I mean, I remember the World Trade Center being built in 1973, driving into New York City and seeing, the 2 towers with these bright orange construction tarps on them. And I had the profound thought that I want to make a mark on the world like that. That's just such a bold thing to do, a bright orange tower on the skyline. And then the other experience for me was, when I was growing up and I would go to synagogue, I would sit in the synagogue and I would look at the architecture and I'd get lost in the architecture of the building far more than paying attention to probably what I was supposed to be paying attention to. And so I think that in some ways I've known I was going to be an architect for a very, very long time.
Wow. So that, I mean, it's a pretty smooth transition into architecture. So you immediately jumped into something that, you said it was easy, but we know that's relative, right? To you, it came easy to draw and to make and things like that.
I guess easy is maybe the wrong word.
Yeah.
For me, like I said, I failed 7th grade Spanish, and languages have been a very challenging thing for me my whole life. But the language I understood was graphics. I can see things and visualize things in ways that I think many people can't, and that certainly helped me and has helped me in in the architecture field and certainly in practice.
Yeah. So you follow your bliss, you follow your curiosity, and then I guess looking at it, it was fueled by family. It was fueled by that teacher, right? Sometimes we underestimate the role of teachers and how they can guide you to the right path. So that said, then you move forward, and how do you end up opening a firm? Like, so from knowing that you love something to then wanting to run the ship and the show and being the captain. I mean, that's a big move there. So how do you go about that?
It is and it's not. I mean, I think that certainly when I was in school, and maybe more so for those of us who graduated, I graduated in the early 90s. They train you to be in large part an individualist. I did not work on a single group project when I was in school. I mean, I see this now working on group projects, but so there was interest in from day one in wanting to have a firm. It was a question of having the experience, and I was lucky enough to work for a lot of different architects and architecture firms, and I worked on a lot of different types of projects over the years, and I was working at Michael Graves, and I really loved working with that team, and I loved working on the projects that I was working on, but they were small projects. And I woke up one day and realized that my oldest daughter was 13, and most architecture firms, businesses in general need at least 5 years to establish themselves. I had saved 5 years of salary. I put it aside so I could feed my family for 5 years, even if I wasn't making any money. And I just woke up that day and I came in and I gave my notice, and I think that it was the right time. It was just I had tried one earlier time, and I felt very lost. Even though I worked on lots of different projects, I did not feel like I knew enough. And I think to a certain extent, when it's the right time, and it's different for everyone. But at that point, I felt that I had enough experience to be able to move the firm forward. I think that you don't know what you don't know, and I would certainly wished I had different experience when I started the firm than when I did.
Yeah. Okay. So you basically took two passes at it. At the beginning, it was probably like a test fit in your mind early on, like, oh, can I do this? You were completely lost. But having 5 years worth of salary saved up, Joshua, how do you do that? I can't even save for a week. How could you save up 5 years worth of, I mean, so you pretty much lived a pretty lean life to be able to save up that much money. And did you save it deliberately thinking that eventually you were going to go on your own? Or was just that a practice? And I'm wondering about that, because I also wonder about us architects as like investors, developers, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. But we're not really that great with money, because money and time go next to each other, and sometimes time goes by while you're designing and you don't even track it very well. So if you don't track it, then you don't have a lot of accountability for where it goes. So and it's hard to justify, right? So, but that said, was that a mindset that your parents taught you of discipline with money? Because again, I am sure many of the people watching this that had started a firm or are thinking about starting a firm are like, I can't save 5 years worth of money to be able to support my family. And you're talking about 13-year-old. I mean, we're talking about teenagers times where they want your credit cards to go to the mall.
Yeah,
So
so I mean, I have to add another layer onto it. I have 4 children, so 3 girls and a boy. So when my daughter was 13, my oldest was 13, I had an 11-year-old, I had a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old all at the same time. And and it's not easy. Okay, it's not easy. For me, I was carving off at least 10% of what I was making every year, and I was putting it in a separate account, and I was making sure it was a stable account. So it was, there were some stocks and things like that, so I was growing it on its own as well. And you know, and yeah, you have to be lucky. I mean, I was very lucky that my family was healthy. I was very lucky that that the firms I was at, paid me what I considered to be well, and and it's not easy. And I will say that the notion that architects are bad, with money and bad business people, I think in large part comes out of our training. We're trained to be artists in large part, and I think that that's a problem with architectural education today. Certainly, when I opened my firm, it was like going back to school, and every time I made a mistake, it was like I passed a class in business school. And you learn from your mistakes and your failures, and certainly those first 5 years were transformative for me, and the business.
now that's it. So okay, so you're right. The family was healthy, so there were not accidents or situations where that fund would be touched for anything extraordinary. You kept that going. You were paid okay. I want to know also, for how long were you working for someone else? For how long were you, because it would be important to know from graduation, let's say you have two amazing degrees from two amazing places, but I guess from graduation to when you open your firm, how long were you working?
So I was working, let's see, it's about 18 years.
18
For
years.
other people, let's see, I think 15, 18, something like that. Let's see.
And you at some point didn't feel ready, and you already have been working for 15 to 18 years.
Yeah, so part of it was, I guess it was in 96, I sort of loosely opened my firm. I started doing some decks for some friends and some small renovations and additions. I did a project for my parents. Actually won a national award for that project. But the notion of finding work and getting work, I didn't really know. The firms that I worked for, I'd worked on different types of projects, and I could run the projects, and I understood how to run a project, but I didn't understand how to get work. And before I let myself sort of go down the rabbit hole and and get lost and end up having to spend the money that I had saved, and then I took another look and decided, okay, I wanted to do, I had to get more experience. And at that point, I went to work for a firm that primarily did institutional work in public schools, private schools, things like that. And then after that, I went to work for Michael Graves, and that was in large part because I wanted to work for what I considered a name architect, and I wanted to see and understand, what makes a name architect different, special, unique, and I think all those things combined were. Hold on a second, this guy's.
It happens. Now, I have a similar experience to you, by the way. I worked for multiple firms, and there was one that I consider a named architect, although probably doesn't make it in many books. And it was just that, learning learning what's that like and trying all of them for size, and seeing what's the style of work that I would like to do or practice that I would like to do. So I relate to that. Was Michael Grave the last one that you worked at and then you
Yeah,
jumped off, or?
yeah. I mean, I was working for Michael Graves, and like I said, I ended up leaving there and opening the firm,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in large part
It's
just
it's fun.
like,
It's funny that that was my last experience. The kind of renowned named solo, architect that his name is on the walls. Was my last job before I jumped into flow. I wonder if there's something to be said about that. Maybe this is a coincidence, but was there something about the way that he practiced that made you say, I had the savings, this guy's doing it in X way, I think I can do it. Like, is there something like that?
I mean, it's a little bit. I was working on small projects in the office, and I wanted to be working on larger projects. In my mind, you know, an architect with Michael's stature, he can get very large projects. And I wanted to be working on large projects. And when I was working on the smaller ones, it just made sense to me that if I'm working on smaller ones, that's something I can do myself.
Mhm.
And then I mean, I've been very lucky, and I was able to. I got a restaurant project in Las Vegas within a few months after leaving, Michael's. So, my time working on decks and small additions got shortened.
Yeah, and
And
that's another thing. So how do you go about naming the firm, locating where it's gonna go? How do you go about that? That
so,
beginning.
so for me, I was going to be in Princeton. My family lived in Princeton. I liked the fact that I could be close, that I could be there for them for school events and all sorts of other things. At the same time, I did recognize that Princeton is in large part in the middle of everything. We're, less than an hour to Philadelphia, less than an hour to New York City, you know, two major airports within 45 minutes of us. We could travel around the world if we needed to, and we have.
Hmm.
Um, and a couple months after I had left Michael's, I got a call from Chef Charlie Trotter and Chicago chef, and he asked me if I was interested in working on his Las Vegas restaurant. And out of respect to Michael, I said, because I had worked with him while I was at Michael's, I said, you have to talk to Michael first. And he said, well, I just got off the phone with Michael. And he said, the only one who's going to be able to do this project for me for what I want to pay is somebody who just opened their firm. And he says, do you want to do the project? I said, yes, of course. He said, be in my office tomorrow at 9. I said, I will. I got on a plane at 6 a.m. I was on his front door in Chicago at 9 a.m. and waited for him to show up. And so, that was the beginning. And we ended up doing, we did that project, got that project done on time and on budget at the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas. Subsequently, we've done more than 30 projects for the Venetian over the years, and including their 3-acre pool deck. And I think
Wow.
that's at its core, it's about being responsible to your clients and providing a good product. And we find that people come back, they ask us to do other projects after they do one with
Yeah,
us.
but that's incredible. I mean, Joshua, you moved from, okay, Michael Grave, okay, great. You did a couple little decks and your parents' project, and then you get this phone call. You did the ethical thing, which is, hey, this is not a client that belongs to me. Like, I don't feel comfortable doing this. You ethically did the correct thing, but you were ready to go. You were the next day at his house. You had to wait for him. And then you proved yourself because you did a good job and you continue doing a good job with him. That's not the norm. Oftentimes people struggle for a little longer. So
Yeah.
I guess you already had a little bit of a reputation and you already had a little bit of a network that already existed, which you didn't have in the previous attempt, right? And I would call that a mental attempt because probably you didn't even move forward to try to really open the firm. You dabble at it and said no, no way. So yeah, so that was a lot of luck. But you also did a good job. So, you know, we always talk about luck and how that's subjective, but it's like it's the fact that you were ready for the right time at the right moment in the right place.
Yeah.
You know, if you were not ready, you would have passed on and said, nope, this is too much. Now that's it. Was it just you? When did you hire your first person? How do you go about that?
So I am in large part a delegator, somebody who needs people around me. So I opened the firm, and within a month, I had somebody who was helping me with, bookkeeping and office management stuff, and I had somebody who was doing some drafting for me. Um, but I went from that to the restaurant. They needed to have 4 people, so I had reached out to friends. People were coming in after hours. Everything that was going to help me succeed in this.
I mean, congrats on being a delegator, by the way. Most architects, as you know, we've trained to do everything. We do everything, right? So, but you from the very beginning knew that you couldn't do it alone. So you already had a team. But the financials of that, how do you work those into your budgets? How do you ensure that?
Yeah, I mean that's the challenge. I mean, for me, I sacrificed pulling a salary, from the firm, and so by having saved that money and put it aside, I was able to draw that money for myself, and the funds that were coming in, I was able to allocate for the staff. And they
Okay.
weren't, it was a part-time person and one full-time person, and that grew. And as
Is that how you started from the get go? You immediately got out of that place and you immediately say, hey, listen, I'm going to need help with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I mean, I needed help with, how do I say, I can organize anybody else's space, but I don't do well organizing my own. And I have a lot of different things going on at once, and so I needed somebody to support me to make sure that bills got paid on time, that meetings were met, that my schedule was together, help me with travel, all that kind of stuff. I get very myopic and focused on the task at hand, and I can lose track of time very easily. And so I knew right away I needed somebody to help me, manage that. And so I had somebody part-time, their spouse was working at Princeton University. They had an architecture background. So it was sort of able to do 2 things at once. And then I hired a draftsman to do some CAD work for me as well. And I can't say that I was paying them, a huge salaries, but I was certainly paying them a salary that they felt comfortable with, and both of them worked for me for about 2 years. So
Nice, very nice. Okay. So it was easy to justify whatever you were paying because you knew what you didn't know and what you were not good at. So you were not it was never gonna be the Joshua Zinder show. Technically you need this ecosystem to thrive, right?
yeah. And
Well,
the other thing is, at the same time, you asked about the name of the firm. So it was Joshua Zinder Architecture and Design, and I set it up that way to sound like it was bigger than it is. And it was important that people thought that, and I had certainly people, and we would go by JZAD was sort of our moniker, and we had people calling us up in the beginning saying, "I'd really like to talk to the partner in the firm. I don't remember his name, but I believe his last name started with a D." And I was like, "Oh, you want to talk to Mr. Design?" Yes. And but it did help. I mean, having that moniker, there were certainly people who would call me up and say, "I want you to come out," and it doesn't have to be you. You can have one of your team members come out, and inevitably it would always be me in the beginning. But over the years, I have had partners. I have an amazing partner right now, who I went to school with, who I worked at Michael Graves with, who I've known for 30 plus years, and somebody that you can really trust. And certainly over the years, I've had partners that, let's just say, were less than trustworthy. And you learn those lessons in business, and it's not always easy.
all right. So, because I'm putting my hat of someone that's trying to open a firm as I'm asking these questions, and I understand. Okay, you had a pretty good financial, I guess, foundation. So you were good there. You knew you needed a team for bookkeeping and making sure the bills were paid on time, and that production staff was there at least to assist you as you went. You knew your role as the person that still needed to meet with everybody at the very beginning anyway. So all good. So that some people are like, oh, when do I hire? When don't I? For you, it wasn't even a question. You just started like that. That's how it was envisioned. Have you found any issues with the fact that it's Joshua Zinder architecture plus design? Like, has that been also a problem? Because you said like it made it sound like a bigger firm, but at the same time, has people bought into that name? Has it been difficult? And how do you think about transitioning? And because we have to have a succession plan, right? Like how do you work that out into the fact that the name is still engraved there forever, as it is right now?
Yeah, I'm just starting to think about that now. Just starting to think about what the next level is. I'm trying to come up with paths for our current staff who've been here long, over a long period of time, how they can become vested in the firm beyond their time, so financially. And my partner and I are currently working through a plan to do just that. I would love to tell you that I have the solution, but I don't. It's a challenge when, certainly, coming out of COVID, there were certainly times when we were tight and working paycheck to paycheck, payroll to payroll, I should say. And plus, the other challenges, there have been times when we've gone, 190 days waiting for people to pay us. And that makes, meeting payroll and things like that very difficult.
Yeah.
Line of credits and all that only goes so far. They buy you some time. So, it's not always so easy. And, but I think that, we certainly want to have a succession plan. What that is, I don't know. I think I would certainly want to hear from the people that have been with me the longest and hear what their thoughts are. And, I'm not, I don't think the name has to be what it is for forever. Certainly, the other firm that I run, Landau Zinder Architecture, there are specific reasons for that name and for why it's worth keeping, for a period of time. But I think that every business needs to weigh the value in the name and how long it's going to support you.
Yeah, no. This is good. Now, one thing I'm really interested in listening to, and probably the audience within the SFX, is all of these modalities of practicing architecture, or ways of which is something that you're very good at, that we've spoken about within the SFX, of other ways that you can practice, or other innovative ways that you can kind of develop a career or an alternative career. So Joshua, tell me a little bit about that. And my hint is that Landau Zinder Architecture has to do something with that idea, right? Because it's two different firms, technically, right? You have two different firms.
So on its face, it is two different firms. The reality is it's not. And that's a trick that I think people don't understand, certainly over the years, we've partnered with other architecture firms and we've done joint ventures and all sorts of complex partnership arrangements and things like that. And in this case, as I had mentioned, I'm Jewish, and I found inspiration in my synagogue growing up, and as I mentioned, and it was important to me to work on synagogue projects. And I had started the firm, and over the first, 4 or 5 years, I had interviewed for probably about a half a dozen different synagogues, and I never got a single one of them. And inevitably, they told me, "Oh, you have great work, but you've never done a synagogue before, or you only done synagogues when you work for other people." And it was getting that first project, getting that first typology. And And in the other areas, and we work on a lot of different projects, so that first project, as I mentioned, was a restaurant. Then we worked on some office, workplace, hospitality, mixed use, multifamily. I was able to sort of transition the experience that I had into those projects. But with synagogues, it just never, those organizations only wanted to work with people who they felt completely understood them. And I was active in the Jewish community. I was on boards, board of my synagogue. I was on building committees, and it wasn't enough. And I looked into starting a whole other business. Well, then you have taxes, then you have to pay your staff depending on what project you're working on. It just was awfully complex. And at the time I was teaching at NJIT, they're in their architecture program. And I needed somebody to come in as a visiting critic, a juror. And I had talked to Michael Landau, who was a local architect who specialized in synagogues. And driving up and back to Newark, we sort of came to the realization that he was ready to retire. He didn't want to be doing the business of architecture anymore. He wanted to work on synagogues, but didn't want to really do much of anything else. He just wanted to design things. And I was looking to start doing that work, and I had the business. And so we created a DBA, a doing business as. And so it's Landau Zinder Architecture, and we're doing business as Joshua Zinder Architecture and Design. So effectively, all of the legal structures that we needed to have in place, are handled by Joshua Zinder Architecture and Design. At the same time, by creating this entity, we were able to leverage Michael's 40 plus years of synagogue design and his portfolio. And the first project we pursued together, we got. And we don't do a huge amount of synagogue work, as a fraction, as a percentage of all the work we do. It's probably about 10, maybe 15% of our work. But we can present to clients that we're a specialist, that we do synagogue work, and so our Landau Zinder Architecture is all synagogue work, and our Joshua Zinder Architecture and Design is pretty much everything else.
Now, Joshua, you were infatuated with this thing of synagogues. Other people would have just given up and said, you know what, I'm done. I'm not dealing with this thing. But it was something that repeatedly seems to have recurrently come up in your mind. Like, I want to do this job. I'm going after all these interviews. And by the way, I have to commend you. That was an incredible idea. I have already thought of how would I partner with someone? How would I do this in a way that I can actually show myself as an expert of something so that we can open up those doors? And you said it, there are project types that are in high demand. They don't care whether you've already done them or not. They just have a high demand. And they need an architect, right? Like those restaurant jobs, they just need somebody to move things forward. So you got them, great. You can translate that into residential, great. But synagogue, it is very specific. It is as specific as it gets. It's not just a church. It's not just some sort of religious place for the generalists. It's a very particular demographic, which you happen to be dear to and belong, to that group. And you broke through, literally that was incredible. That was incredible. But what is it about synagogues? It's what you said, your heritage and the meaning of it, and how basically you owe your inspiration as to why you became an architect to even go into the synagogues, right?
Yeah. And I think it's all, it's all of that. I think it's also that, over the years, I'd like to work on education projects. I like to work on, assembly projects. I like to work on, office projects. I like to work on all these different types of things. And at its core, all of those different types of projects, I think we ended up making it about the individual community that we're addressing. And synagogue projects, for me, bring together all those other typologies. So, you have a social space, you have a ritual, spiritual space, you have educational spaces, office spaces, meeting places, and there are a few typologies. Certainly a church, a mosque, all of these interfaith entities, they all provide that for their communities. And I think the notion of being able to, have the opportunity to elevate architecture beyond the built environment, to something that is truly sort of inspirational, spiritual. And I guess in the back of my mind, I'm hoping that one day, one of the places that I create, one of the synagogues I create, will inspire, someone else to become an architect. And
Wow.
And so I think that's one of the reasons why it was so important to me, and to not give up on it. Because certainly you're right. When you lose enough projects in a certain typology, you're like, well, that's not going to be for me. But we've been able to bridge all those gaps, and certainly with this structure and with this partnership, it's worked really well.
Nice. All right. So, that's a testament to pursuing what you love and what you want to do. You'll find innovative ways of getting it done. I like this idea. I'm going to borrow that idea of doing a DBA with someone else and figuring out. There's probably more that we can talk about, probably at the AIA conference coming up a little bit, over a cup of tea, of how that kind of worked out and how that can be brought forward. But that said, we've covered a little bit of that early time. Financially, looks like Joshua Zinder has been able to manage. You mentioned something. You mentioned a line of credit too, and a lot of people starting their own firm, they don't even know how to get started, and they don't even know that they need it. Like, how do you also, Joshua? I mean, I'm just picking your brain, and I already know you, enough to know that you're really good with money, and that it seems that you're really good with finances. Because honestly, just having the 5 years saved up, right? And understanding that you need a team to make sure everything is paid and covered, right? Right. That already tells me a lot. The creative side of having to do a DBA to pursue these kinds of projects tells me that you will manage, you will engineer your way by ingenuity. You're gonna find your way through how to solve the problem. So the line of credit part, how do you go about that? And it seems like you have one, but
getting the initial line of credit wasn't that big of a deal. Banks always want to lend you money.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether or not you can afford the interest and afford the line that you're putting forward. But for me, the biggest problem I had with the line of credit was separating the line of credit and how it affects your credit rating as a person versus the business. So, Josh was into architecture and design. The banks thought that was me, as a person, even though it's a separate entity, it has a separate tax ID number, it's a separate thing. And so the ups and downs of that line of credit were affecting my credit rating. And it took me, I guess, 3 years to finally separate it. And the trick about separating it, which is financially painful, I dipped into some long-term savings I had, and I stuck it in a bank account in a bank as collateral for the full value of the line of credit I was looking for. In that case, it was $100,000. I dropped it in that bank, and it basically sat for 2 years, and I wasn't able to really touch it, but it collateralized the line of credit. And once I established, over that 2-year period that I paid back my line and that I was, financially stable, at that point, I was able to take that money out and no longer collateralize it, because they felt that the business was holding its own. But because the business itself was just created and had no credit, there was no, I could co-sign it or countersign it as an individual, but because my name and the business name were the same, I needed to establish specific credit for the business. That was the tough
because
part.
you are sole proprietorship basically in that sense, right?
So I started out, it was basically a sole proprietor LLC, and then it's now a partnership LLC.
Okay. All right. So that's it. So early on, you got that line of credit, and you had to use that collateral, because typically, in my experiences, they take a certain amount of years or a year or of your revenues, and they will say, well, looking at your revenues and profits, we can give you X, which is about 10%. Often it's about 10% of the total revenue. We try to look into that too, and we thought, well, that was it was early on, and it was like a mediocre amount, wouldn't really do much for us anyway. So I was like, nah, that doesn't help. So that said, Joshua, what are your endeavors right now? What are you up to right now? What are you excited about? What are you, I know, I mentioned a little bit of the different modes of operating an architect as developer type of, idea. I want to know more about that side, and how are you leveraging that? How are you using it?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple different ways. I came to the realization, my father was an attorney for years, and he had decided, and he used to tell me this, that as a professional, you'll never make enough money, to really live the way you want to live. You'll make enough money to get by, to support your family, yes, but to be able to travel and eat well and experience life in the way you want, you're always going to be short. And so you need to come up with a way that you can be making money while you're doing business. And so for my father, he invested in school buses, and for 40 years he did school buses for New York City. And he used to tell me, do what you know. Okay, so as a professional, you know something. In his case, he was a transportation law expert, so he got into transportation. And it's funny because over the years he used to try dabbling in real estate, and he would lose his shirt. He really had a tough time on those real estate projects, and but that was always lingering with me, and it was in the back of my head. I started the business. I got things going, to the point where the business was stable, and I was looking at people that we were building projects for, and they were making money, and they were not making money like, okay, we complete the project, we're making money. They were making money that they finish the project and they get a check every month because somebody's paying them rent, and that additional income was something that was really of interest to me. I'm a very hard worker, but in my mind, I don't want to work as hard. And I want to have a path that I can, you talked about earlier, transitions, right? I want a path that I can transition out of this business and I can still have money coming in. And so I started speaking with my clients, talking with them about, well, can I share in the investment? Can I put some skin in? And inevitably they'd say yes. On occasion, they would say, how about you give us, 30% off your architecture fees, and we'll give you that amount of money as investment in the project. And as a sole proprietor, you can do that. When you have a LLC, it's not so easy. But basically along that path, I've been again lucky, and I've been able to invest with a couple of my clients on projects, and I've also been able to buy my own projects and acquire my own projects. What I found is that lending institutions love it when architects are partners on building projects. And so right now I have 6 buildings in Princeton that we own, including our office here. And
Wow, congratulations, brother. I mean, that's huge.
yeah, and it's certainly been it's been a long path. And so I have, like a 5 to 10% investment in 2 of the buildings. So they're just, we're part of a team, but they, I get a check every year, at the end of the year from those businesses. So that's nice. And then others, I have, personally 2 apartment buildings. One has 10 apartments and the other one has 7 apartments, and also has a shop in it. And it's really amazing because with the loans we were able to get, we could put together deals on the projects. We have investors who wanted to come in because I was working on it. They're set up so that I can get, I get the architecture fees on the project, I get developer fees on the project, and then I get the ongoing income. And I think architects have skills that very often people say, oh, architect's going to over design the project and all that. But when an architect is willing to put their own money into a project, and it doesn't have to be a large amount of money, you put your own money into the project, all of a sudden other people are willing to come in because they're going to say, okay, it's your money too you're going to care about. You're going to be frugal with it. You're going to be sensitive to the investment, and that transition is really what helps. And at the same time, I've been able to push my partners on those deals to talk to them about architecture and how architecture makes a difference. And in one case, we did an adaptive reuse of a Masonic lodge into 10 apartments, and it's been fully rented since it opened, and people like that sort of connection to the community. And the other project, we have the apartment building. We're about to add 8 more apartments onto it. Our office building here, we're going to do an addition and add a laundromat for the community here. So there are paths for architects to be more than architects, be more than just a professional. And so the notion that architect as developer, it doesn't have to be foreign, and it certainly shouldn't be foreign to a small firm operator, because you work too hard. All of us work too hard to not be able to benefit from the works we create. And whether or not it's a single family home that you're doing the development on, or a larger multifamily project or commercial project, if you're willing to invest and put in your time toward the project, then you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to join you in that venture.
Wow.
And the
Incredible.
other thing is I think architects are attuned to the real estate much more than many other people. So in Princeton, I understand the approval process. I understand how to get permits. I know what it's like to get things built. I understand what the construction costs are. I know the neighborhoods. So by knowing your community, it adds a whole nother level to this. And I think there aren't enough architects out there who are taking advantage of that.
No. We actually here at Flow believe the same way too. Me and my partner, we discuss it all the time. Mostly because we look at some clients that we have that are not really that sophisticated in many ways, and you're right, they walk away with a check all the time, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even know if I made a profit on this project. These guys, I don't want to denigrate anybody, but they probably didn't even graduate high school. I don't know. Maybe their mom and dad had some money and helped them out to get started, but why couldn't we do it? So I the same where you are at is kind of where we're kind of trying to walk towards. And I would say that to the audience of small firm owners, you are absolutely right. We work too hard for too little to not be able to use those skills for the right thing. But to have financial freedom, to travel the world, to spend time with our children, right? Time that you will never be able to get back. There's just no way. And it's all about, prioritizing and planning, if anything. But that said, I want to then talk to Joshua now and how Joshua could talk to Joshua before. What have you learned now that you would have wanted to tell Joshua earlier, 15, 10 years, 20 years ago, that would have made a difference for you? In fact, if you can catalog it as 5 things to make it very focused, 5 things that you would say, well, or maybe more, whichever you want to do, or less, that you say, you, Joshua, need to learn X, Y, and Z. It's going to help you a lot, and don't be stubborn, right? Whichever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there's only one thing. There's really only one thing that if I could tell. Now, I was very stubborn when I was younger. Not that I'm not stubborn now, but if I could tell myself to basically go to business school, even if it was at night type of thing. Like I said earlier, I was ready to go out on my own much earlier than I did. And part of it was getting that confidence. Part of it was, being able to get up and talk in front of people and things like that. And I could do it. I just didn't believe I could. But all of that sort of fell into place when I finally did it. What I didn't have was the background in business. I didn't have the understanding of what it took, how many projects do you need to make payroll, and all of that that goes behind it, whether it's, forming a business with the state, whether it's, setting up your tax ID numbers, all that kind of stuff. That's really the simple stuff, but it's whether or not, the financial model that you've put together works. And that was a very painful process, and making a lot of mistakes. And so when I said earlier, it was like going to business school. If I had the clarity then that I do now, I would have told myself to go to business school. It doesn't matter so much which business school, take classes online, but learn what's involved with running a business. Because as an architect, you want to be an artist. You want to be somebody who creates things. And, to so many architects, as you mentioned, they fail not because they're not good architects, not because they're not creative or they know how to run construction projects or any number of things. They fail because they don't know what to do in their business. They don't know how to get the funds from the clients, which is always a challenge. But after they get the funds, they've already spent it. The notion that if you do have a line of credit, then you're effectively financing your clients' projects. And while you wait for them to pay you, you're the one who's taking on the interest and all that. And if you don't factor that into your fees when you're sending them the fees to begin with, then you're just losing money. Every project you're going to be losing money. So you might as well just hand over money to the people to do the project. And yeah, to a certain extent, I've been there. But I think really the most important thing is it's rare that an architecture program has a solid business discussion. When they talk about practice, they often talk about, types of structures of architecture firms. You could be a sole proprietor, you could be a small firm, large firm, and this is what you would do in a big firm. And you can have a big firm that's made up of smaller, like they'll talk about the structure of architecture firms, but they very rarely tell you about what it's like to actually run a business and what you need to know to run a business. And so yeah, that's the thing that, with regard to architecture, I would say, I would advise myself. The other thing I would tell myself, which I think I've been very lucky, pursue your happiness. Go after the things that make you happy. But
now that said, we've already looked back. What's next for Joshua Zinder? I know you're applying now for your fellowship, and hopefully that will come through. You're still very active with AIA New Jersey, but also the board, the SFX board. So, but what's next, Joshua? Like what's your ideal next 10 years, 20 years, 15 years? What are you looking towards? What are you looking forward to? What are you excited about? I mean, you've already nailed a lot of things, and the financial part seems to be getting into a good place. It's always been generally okay, as it appears from what I gather. But like, what's there? Like, you're like, well, I'm there now. I'm there. I'm there. Whatever that is, right? Because you obviously own all these, real estate for a reason. So what's that reason? When are you gonna get there?
Yeah, I mean, what's there? I'm one of those people who's really never satisfied with what's going on around me. I always want more.
Yeah.
I sort of look to the food that's on the other person's plate and say, oh, maybe I should have that.
Me too. It always looks better. Yeah.
And I honestly think that's part of when they train architects, that's part of what they do. We present projects, and we present projects right next to somebody else who's also presenting the same project, and it's like, the desire to be better is always there. Certainly, in some ways I want to work less, but at the same time, I still have this sort of, Fountainhead. I don't know if you've read that book or not, but
yep.
That was, certainly important for me when I was younger. But, there's somehow in the back of my head still a notion that, I could do a singular building that could be iconic, that could be special, that could be something that's taught in architecture school. As I get older, maybe that's becoming less and less possible, or less and less of a reality. But I think that, I think that's still something to strive for myself. And I'm hoping that the business practices that I put in place will potentially help me do that. And whether or not I'm designing something that's significant for myself or designing something that's significant for a client, I don't know that really matters. But certainly, setting up yourself to have the freedom and the ability to pursue that is what's important.
It's funny, like you're what you're looking forward to um still is intermingled with architecture. You still want to do that iconic structure, maybe a synagogue, right? Iconic synagogue that people write about, like, and maybe there's a documentary about Joshua Zinder, and this is going to be a part of it. And I think that that's a good thing to look forward to, and I think that that's a very honest and modest to some extent, because it is not just for you; it's also for, you said it, another kid that's gonna go to that synagogue and get inspired, right? So it's not really the ego, oh, Joshua Zinder's got to put his name on things, right? Not necessarily. But it's also a personal reward. And I think you're on the right path with all the things that you're building in place, and you're going to continue to improve those practices. It looks like the business itself has given you the masters of business. So you probably, now you should probably be able to, you can go teach it. It's like, yeah, let me show you how this is done. So now, that's it. Joshua, how do we find you? I know it's been a nice time. How do those people find information about you? How do they connect within the SFX? It's been a very nice time talking. I know today wasn't a perfect ideal day for me personally, but yeah, tell us how those people find you, and any last minute remark that you want to give to a student or someone that's trying to practice architecture.
I mean, I guess last remark for a student, somebody who wants to practice architecture, is to love it. And I think that's what I always told my students. If you're not loving what you're doing, then you should be doing something else. And architects, we struggle. We don't make a lot of money. We often, are not treated as professionals the way we would ideally want to be treated. So if you don't love it, you shouldn't be doing it. That being said, if you are doing it, love it. Make sure that you're always learning, and if you're not learning, go to another firm and love it, because that's what's important. And I think that maybe the next generation is doing it a little bit better than my generation, but also don't forget that you have a life outside of work, and those things I think are what's important. As far as how to get in touch with me, I mean, certainly, my email is a good way to do it, through our website, joshuazinder.com or jzad.com. Either one of them work. There's also Landau Zinder Architecture. People should take a look there. Yeah.
I'm going to take a look at those synagogue projects that you showcased there. But thank you so much, Joshua, and we'll stay in touch. We'll see you at the AIA conference. Looking forward to it, and always a pleasure. I hope you get that fellowship coming up soon. It will be a win for all of us. All right. Thank you, Joshua. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Be well done.